My many colleagues on the floor discussing this amendment. I think many of them have made important points on our side about how this is a new policy. It is absolutely a change from the past administration, and there are frightening anecdotes about what's already been happening. A recent investigation by BuzzFeed News found that pregnant women in immigration detention have been denied adequate and urgently need medical care, have been shackled around the stomach, as we have heard, while being transported between facilities, and have been physically and psychologically mistreated. Our argument here has shifted a little about whether or not our side of the aisle is supportive of law enforcement, and I appreciate my colleague's remark that we have strong support of law enforcement. This is much more about the orders being given to people who have to carry them out. This is not an indictment of law enforcement. I would say, and I would suggest to my colleagues, Mr. Chair, that we think about the fact that this is an indictment of the Trump administration. You know, last week we had a very long hearing. This week we have another very long hearing. There have been a tremendous number of amendments put forward about this issue of separating children and parents on the border. And I appreciate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Last week they accepted many of these amendments. Today they've accepted many and put them in the manager's amendment. I hope they'll reconsider about this one and accept this amendment. But the fact is, we're an appropriations committee who has to tell the executive branch of this government how to behave. We've had to have amendment after amendment on the most basic things about whether other people's children can be drugged in detention, about whether children should be ripped from their parents without adequate notice to the parents about what's about to happen, about whether or not pregnant women should be detained and shackled. You think of all the things that we've talked about in the last two committee hearings. We're having to tell an administration that has proven it's inhumane, it's having unthinkable behavior, has not thought any of these things out. Just yesterday, we were told that there are 463 parents who have already been deported, and there's a court deadline of tomorrow to reunite these families. Somebody explain to me how this administration is going to make that happen. I was one of the people who was fortunate enough to go down to the border to see this, to visit detention centers, to see crying mothers who had no idea how to get in touch with their children, had not spoken to them. Seeing kids in detention, seeing babies in cribs. I mean, we have endless stories, and it is an indictment of an incredibly incompetent, inhumane, unthinkable administration that is basing their behavior on ideology, nothing practical, nothing that makes any sense. And I would suggest they have absolutely no idea how to reunite many of these children with their parents. And those 463 parents are in foreign countries now because they were told, many of them, oh, you'll be much better off. Just leave the country, we'll get you back together. And in fact, we are not able to do any of that. So it's an administration that frankly has to be told how to function by an appropriations subcommittee or the courts. That's what this indictment is about. And I think in the name of Americans, in the name of our country, this has to stop. And we should be working together on ways to make sure that they behave very differently. And I yield back my time.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. Mr. Pocan, and then